The Dinner for Six lists are in Jerry McCarty's hands. He's got the authority now, so he'll be back in the narthex. Captains of the Dinner for Six groups and others, if you didn't get the list of all the different groups that the group you're going to be in and others are going to be in, Jerry has that. He has the list for you back in the narthex, and I'd like for you to get involved. A good way just to meet different people. This past week, I had to get all those names on little pieces of paper. Went to the big conference table in the library. It was like a giant jigsaw puzzle, trying to match up people you kind of know, people you might not know. You get to meet them during the dinner time. But it's a good opportunity for us. Church life is always good. Find a way that the church works effectively. There's nothing else like it in all of the world, really. And Jesus, talking about his ministry, today we're looking at the way he defines his ministry in Luke chapter 4. This is when he comes back to his home church. It's his first technical sermon that he's preached, and it brought back memories for me. I remember the first time I preached, I was 14 years old. I was full of zeal, full of power, idealism, teenager, invincible, immortal, and all-knowing, and everything else. And it was my first sermon. It was Youth Sunday, and I was pumped. I'll take the sermon. I volunteered for that immediately. Everybody else was very relieved. And I put it all together. And I announced, this is going to take probably 30, 40 minutes. I've got some powerful preaching to do this night. I was ready to go. And so we had everything set. And the way our church was structured, the stage was up front as always, and then there was the back area where you couldn't see what was going on out front. And so I was waiting my turn, following the script, and ready to go out. And when my time came, I didn't realize there was a skit right before me, and so they took the pulpit away. And so when I came out, there was nothing. I was depending on hiding behind that pulpit and holding on to it while I was shaking. But anyway, too late. I just started preaching, and I preached. I preached a storm. I was just sure thunder and lightning was going to start up at any moment. And just when I thought, boy, it's probably gone for 30, maybe 40 minutes now, I peeked at my watch. 3 minutes. And I thought, boy, that's not even close to my goal. And I'm in a jam because this is my first sermon. I don't have any other sermons to rely on at this point except this one. So being a good American, full of innovation, I preached the only sermon I had one more time. I thought, maybe I can stretch this a little more. Looked at my watch. We're up to 4 minutes now. And I thought, well, in conclusion, let me summarize what I've just preached here, and did it 3 times and managed to get up to right about 5 minutes. Now, we're in a loving church, and they remember me growing up. I was little Stevie and all that, and they all encouraged me. They loved me. They're just a good church, and said, boy, you had more courage than I would to be able to get up there. And I thought, if only you knew, drenched in sweat, shaking and scared. And it's amazing. I even had the desire to stick with ministry after all that, but God had a calling upon me, and I had a desire. Well, Jesus has his ministry beginning here, and he's been in the wilderness tempted by Satan. He comes to his hometown, his home church, First Synagogue of Nazareth. Here we are. And Jesus walks in, and he's ready to give his first sermon. Let's see if he does any better. It's in the Gospel of Luke chapter 4. It'll be up on the walls. It's in your bulletin too, and if you brought your Bibles, please turn there. Luke 4, starting with verse 14. Well, Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread through the whole countryside. And he was teaching in their synagogues, and everyone praised him. When he went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day he went into the synagogue, as was his custom, and he stood up to read. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. And unrolling it, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners, and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And then he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of everyone in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began by saying to them, "Today this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Jesus lists the prophecy of Isaiah, says, "This is what I am about." In this first segment we're looking at, to proclaim good news to the poor, we might find some illumination from the book of Revelation in chapter 3. "You say, 'I am rich. I have acquired wealth and do not need a thing.' But you do not realize that you're wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, naked. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, so you can become rich, and white clothes to wear, so you can cover your shameful nakedness, and salve to put on your eyes, so that you can see. May God add power to the reading of this word, that it takes on new meaning for us, that it might shock us a little bit, but that it might surely make us uncomfortable to think again with the heart of Jesus. Jesus enters into our world. He begins his ministry. He preaches at Nazareth, and it's a powerful sermon that he's got there. The way people receive it is a mixed response, you might say. But I appreciate so much he draws from the book of Isaiah, chapter 61, to define his ministry. These are the things he's focused upon: to be able to proclaim good news to the poor, proclaim freedom for the prisoners and for the blind to give them sight, release the oppressed, proclaim the year of the Lord's favor of grace. This is what Jesus focuses upon. When he looks at people around him, these 5 categories are running through his head, how he reaches out to the people round about him. And he proclaims this message. This is my plan of attack, if you will. This is my strategy, what I'm going to be doing for the next 3.5 years of my ministry, leading up to that cross at Calvary. This is my focus. And he went on to talk about this prophecy of Isaiah. And he proclaims that the prophets were coming. And sometimes they spoke to the Gentiles. Sometimes they reached out to the people that were not part of the Jewish heritage. They were reaching out to the people who are on the outside, not on the inside group. A lot of the Jewish law is structured on that. It determines who's in and who's out. If you're a good Jew, you're in. If you're not, if you're a Gentile or a Samaritan, a half-blood, whatever it may be, you're on the out. And Jesus said, many of the prophets came and they preached to the people who were on the out. Jesus said, I'm concerned about that too. How we reach out to everyone, not just our own household, but how we reach out to all people when they're in a time of need. Well, the people there in Nazareth didn't like that message at all. We like the idea about being in and some people being out. We like to have that favorite position before God. And they didn't care for Jesus saying that all people are the same, all people have needs, and if there are needs in our world, these are the ones that God reaches out to. And you ever read the story? To find out what happened to Jesus after that. Some of the people grabbed him, and they wanted to take him out to a cliff that was not too far outside of the city, and they were going to throw him off the cliff. I read that story and I thought, well, my sermon wasn't too bad. Nobody took me out to a cliff to throw me off of it, or maybe my preaching wasn't that powerful. Maybe I should look at it that way. People had a way of disturbing people that were very comfortable about their own salvation. People that were very comfortable where they thought they related to God. But Jesus has words for our world. We shouldn't be quite so comfortable, shouldn't be quite so confident when it leads to arrogance. We need a humility to come before our God. And that first facet of his preaching ministry is bring good news to the poor. Well, who are the poor? Who are the poor? I've tried to help people with their finances, and I've talked to others that have tried to also, and it's just amazing. We eventually come up to this point to let the person know that you're broke. You don't have any money left. And they respond by saying, how can I be broke? I've still got checks in my checkbook. And I thought, okay, that might be our first clue on why you're broke here. But we have a hard time understanding poverty and what poverty means. When Jesus is talking about the poor, he's not thinking so much about checkbooks and bank accounts. He's got something else in his mind. You remember the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. You know what the first Beatitude is? Blessed are the poor in spirit. Jesus said, this is where it all starts. This is the first Beatitude. Blessed are the people that are poor in spirit and that they know that they're poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This is the kind of poverty Jesus wants to talk about, the poverty of heart, the bankrupt spirit, the bankrupt soul that realizes that they need help. I can't do this on my own. I need someone to rescue me. When we realize that kind of poverty, we realize it just might be epidemic in our world today. People that are impoverished of spirit. Mother Teresa, I love reading about her life and things she did. All the work she did in India to care for the impoverished, the outcasts, the untouchables, and reaching out to them with such loving care. And she came to America and did a tour here. And people were so excited, they lavished all this fine things upon her. the best hotels, the best dinners, the best entertainment, the best of everything. And toward the end of her tour, she was ready to go back to India. And one of the reporters were interviewing her and all excited about what she had to say and what she thought about America. How was your visit? Were you treated well? And Mother Teresa responded that she had visited all these affluent American cities, but she was brokenhearted, burdened by all of the poverty that she saw. Wherever she went, she saw poverty. And the reporters had to check the itinerary. Who let her into the ghettos? Who let her into the bad places? I thought it was all luxury that she saw all the time. I thought it was just red carpet treatment wherever she went. And the result of that story is, it was. She was always in the best of hotels, the best of dinners, the best of entertainment. And she saw with a different kind of sight. She saw the spiritual poverty that plagued our country. And she said, I'm so grieved by what I found here. We need help. We have a trouble understanding that kind of spiritual poverty. To realize that we might think we're very well off and don't need any help, but to come up short and to realize there's a perspective that needs some addressing here, that we all have a certain poverty that needs to be dealt with before God. But we always don't understand. We always have it blurred. I like this little story I read that in Hollywood there's an exclusive school that's attended by the children of the movie stars, producers, and directors. We'd say the privileged kids here. And they were asked to write a composition on the subject of poverty. Interesting. And one little girl started her literary piece this way. She wrote, once upon a time, there was a poor little girl. Her father was poor. Her mother was poor. Her nanny was poor. Her chauffeur was poor. Her butler was poor. In fact, everybody in the house was very, very poor. Sometimes we don't always understand about that poverty. We have a perspective issue. Are we able to see with the eyes that Jesus sees into our world? To see that there's a certain spiritual poverty in every heart that needs to be addressed. Jesus told a parable about a man that had a bumper crop, great harvest, had pulling in all of the harvest, all the crops, and well, you just see it, everything was soaring for this man. And he said, I need bigger barns. I need bigger silos. I need bigger this and bigger everything. And he built the bigger barns and the bigger silos, and the grain just kept coming in, and his wealth just kept growing. And it's funny, when you read the parable closely, he starts having a conversation with himself, saying, self, you know, you're doing pretty good. You can just sit back and take it easy now. And it's almost like he's answering to himself. In this short parable, that first person singular, that I, me kind of thing, comes up 13 times in this little story. There's only 8 verses to it. He's so busy talking to himself about how great he is and how wonderful he's doing. And Jesus, remember parables, they always got a sting in their tail. And Jesus concluded that parable by God coming to him and saying, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? You've built up so much wealth in this world, but you don't understand that you're very poor indeed, full of poverty. When John was in heaven and saw the great revelation that the Lord had for him, and Jesus tells him to write letters to the 7 churches and let them know this personal message that Jesus has for them. And one of them goes with this letter. You think in your church, I'm rich. I've acquired wealth. I don't need a thing. I don't need help. Don't need God's underlying message here as well. But you do not realize, Jesus says, that you're wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, naked. You got nice clothes. You don't get it, how naked you are. You don't get how wretched. You don't understand how poor you are. Because these are the eyes of Jesus. Doesn't look on the outward appearance. He looks on the inward appearance. What's happening in the heart here. That's what Jesus is so concerned about. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire. He's not talking about coins here. He's talking about that spiritual wealth. That way you can become rich. White clothes to wear, pure clothes. Not the fine decor and the shiny stuff. So you can cover your shameful nakedness. And salve to put on your eyes so that you can really see. When Jesus looks in our world, he looks in the heart. He looks in the spirit. And he can see all around the poverty that's in each and every one of us. Let us not fool ourselves. We've got that spiritual poverty. But Jesus is there not to say, and shame on you. Jesus is saying, I've got your solution. I've got your salve here. I've got your healing balm. I've got what you need to take care of that poverty. I can make you wealthy in your heart, make you strong in your heart. The healing power that Jesus has for us through forgiveness, through salvation, to receiving him. But it all starts with that poor in spirit, to realize we need help, to realize we do need a Savior, to realize I need someone to save me because I cannot do it on my own. Only Jesus can provide that.